And I was reminded of actually the Christian financial guru, Dave Ramsey, who said every dollar has to have an assignment. And I kind of take that principle to time. Every minute is assigned. If I know it's assigned, then I know where it's going. I don't have to worry about it. I don't feel like I waste it. And it's interesting how we've even appropriated financial terms to time. Waste, invest, spend. It's just fascinating how we've changed all that. But rarely, or not, I don't want to say rarely. I think people have come to the end of themselves where they've like, well, I've done everything I can to produce, but I feel wasted in my soul in the middle of all this because modernity crushes us on. You've talked about the Industrial Revolution. We've talked about that a lot on here, as well as the Enlightenment. We've talked about how we've got into the modern situation in which we find ourselves. We think that balance is probably impossible. We've had other terms that have been used like rhythm. Can you find your rhythm in life? That's much more where it is because we know so many people that are just crushed under anxiety and producing. And how do you help people to pause, or how does the tool help people to pause and reflect over these things in life that they're dealing with?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you actually brought up the connection with money, because a lot of times when people end up using a budget for the first time, at first it's kind of painful because they maybe are facing something and they realize like, oh, that's not how I thought it was. Or maybe it's like, oh man, we actually don't have the money to be living the way we're living. Like we have to say no to certain things or this or that. It makes something concrete that otherwise felt abstract. Now, money by nature is actually more concrete than time is. Time, we all know time is finite, but it never feels finite. It feels finite insofar as we never feel like we get our list done. But it feels like this thing that it's actually more like you wake up every single day and you get a check for $1,000 and it gets spent no matter what at the end of the day. But you're going to get another check the next day. You can't go and save it. You can't go and invest it somewhere and get more time on the back end. Maybe you can theoretically by like living healthy or something. But I think that's also, you don't have control over that, right? It's a little bit hard to wrap one's head around because it's not, I don't think it's obvious, but in a sense, I think one of the reasons that we're always feeling overburdened is because we're constantly living in a sense of like time indebtedness. This feeling that we're always behind, like there's always more we should be doing, like we're always a bit over budget, but we don't really understand it. So one of the things is if you can actually go in upfront, like if you can look at your day and say, look, here's the 3 things that I'm going to commit to with my time. What you're doing is you're actually putting limits on what's actually possible, and you're connecting reality. You're connecting your time to something concrete. And then it's just a question of whether you want to follow through on that or not. But you also get that added benefit on the back end of not having to feel necessarily bad of like, oh, I just don't know like what I did with my time, or I feel like I'm always in debt. Like it actually in some ways makes you confront the reality that you are just finite. And I think that's really, that's one of the critical steps. I had something I'll do with clients is like a time audit, and people who are listening, I recommend doing this sort of thing, where for a week, just track how you spend your time. Hour by hour, every hour, just write down. In the more detailed, the better. Don't just write email for 3 hours, write down like, what were you doing, right? And where did you go? A lot of times people spend time on things they don't think they do. Part of that is, when we're not actually paying attention, we tend to get carried away and time passes faster, right? So I sometimes get sucked into Wikipedia, just researching a random thing. 3 hours can go by without me really realizing it, right? And that tends to happen when we get sucked in, whether it's TV or whatever it might be, YouTube. I don't know what people, who's listening will be able to kind of self-select what that is for them. But the other part of it is sometimes you end up, one of the real gifts of it, I once had a woman go through it with me who was a mother and had a number of kids. And what was actually really helpful for her is she realized like, look, actually, I'd always been really I'd been feeling bad about not being able to move these things forward and how I wasn't getting all this stuff done. But what I realized is I spent a lot of time being a mom, and actually being a mom takes a lot of time. And actually that is my priority. And
Mhm.
so it gave her this kind of blessing of realizing, like, I'm actually spending my time the way that I want to be spending it. Right. Because at the end of the day, it's not my place to go and say, hey, this is how someone should be spending their time. I think if someone's coming from a Christian prerogative, it's more of a grappling of like, how am I spending my time in a way that is really honoring what God's intentions are for me
Mhm.
in my life. And so I thought that was going to connect in with what your question was, but I think I went off a little bit. So maybe you can take that and intertwine it back.
No, I think what you're mentioning is something that I think our people have been feeling for some time. And allow me to explain. We had a pastor friend. I had a conversation with him, and he said we're getting ready to do an outreach, and so I put these cards together at my church and passed them out to everybody. And I got one response out of 200 cards that I sent out to do this new ministry we wanted to do. He goes, so I was quite dejected. Monday, I was really down in the dumps, as many pastors are. And his wife came to him and said, I don't understand why you're so down. I don't know what you thought you were going to get. People are already so busy. You're asking them to do another thing. And he came to me and he said, I need to understand, how do you reach people that are so busy? And I said, I think the question is actually wrong. I think the question is why are we so busy to begin with?